I just saw the Minecraft movie the other night, and yes, I do have some thoughts about it that I'd love to share in just a moment. But watching Jack Black caper and cavort across the screen really got me thinking about the state of video game movies in general. See, video game movies started out in a dark place, and I mean that in the most literal sense of the word. The first and arguably most infamous video game movie adaptation was Super Mario Bros., released in 1993 to widespread ridicule among critics and moviegoers alike. Now, to be fair, the Mario games that had been released up to that point were still 2D platformers, and the plots of all of those games could probably be summed up in about a paragraph, so it was always going to be a tall task to make it into a full-length motion picture. But man, did the people in charge make just about every wrong decision it was possible to make. Because video games were mostly viewed as entertainment for children back then, the people making this movie thought they would need to make it darker and grittier to appeal to a wider, more adult audience. Couple that with the revolving door of directors and writers, along with a couple rewrites along the way, and you get a horrible movie that looks almost indistinguishable from Total Recall at some points. Nothing like the cutesy 2D Mario platformer that people knew and loved. But I guess Hollywood executives thought that maybe the problem was that they hadn't gone dark enough, because they proceeded to make darker and grittier movies repeatedly over the next 20 years, sticking mainly to fighting and survival horror games like Mortal Kombat and Resident Evil. And you want to know the worst part about all this? People actually paid money to see these things. Sure, some of these movies did end up flopping at the box office. Most of them were made by Uwe Boll, someone who I've learned a lot about in researching this video, but probably want to save him for another day. But there were some that made a lot of money. All of this is also in spite of the fact that none of these movies even cracked 50% on Rotten Tomatoes until 2018, when the most recent Tomb Raider movie was released. There were 33 films released before any of them reached just okay. But hey, the seal's broken. Maybe things will start looking up from there. In fact, the very next movie released, Rampage, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, also crushed it with the 51% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now that's what I call 2 in a row. But the truth is, as good as these were, the best was still yet to come.
Meow?
It took Nintendo over a quarter of a century to recover from the disaster that was the Super Mario Bros. Movie, but when they finally licensed out one of their properties again, they had much better luck. Detective Pikachu was released in May of 2019, and honestly I think it surprised a lot of people. It somehow managed to create a living, breathing world full of people and Pokemon living side by side. And they did it in a way that was way less handholdy than the mainline anime series and any associated movies were. See, it doesn't waste time explaining every little intricacy of the Pokemon games and how they work, which in my opinion is one of the cardinal sins that a video game movie adaptation can commit. It just trusts the audience to take in this world that they've created, just like any other fantasy or sci-fi universe. The movie's fully okay with showing and not just telling, and it really lets you immerse yourself in the fiction. Now, the movie wasn't perfect, but it did manage to score a 68% on Rotten Tomatoes and rake in $433 million at the box office. Good enough for second among video game movies at the time. The very next movie adaptation released, Sonic the Hedgehog, was also positively received by audiences. So positively received, in fact, that it's managed to spawn a franchise that has grossed over $1 billion at the box office. A few years after that, we got 2 great TV shows in The Last of Us and Fallout. One of which was pretty by the book, basically just a shot-for-shot remake of the game, but only because I think people pretty much agreed that Telltale nailed it the first time with The Last of Us. And the other is a brand new story written into a universe that a lot of people are familiar with. But the cherry on top of this renaissance, by the way, I spelled that word correctly first time on the script, not to brag, but anyway, the cherry on top was Mario's triumphant return to the big screen. The Super Mario Bros. Movie was released in April of 2023, and it was a huge hit, grossing over $1.3 billion at the box office. Is it a masterpiece? Again, no. I think the story is pretty generic, and one half of the titular Mario Bros. Is sidelined pretty hard for basically the entire movie. But Jack Black crushes this role as Bowser, and the suicidal star is also a bright spot.
There's no escape. The only hope is the sweet relief of death.
So what changed? Why did we struggle for so long to make a halfway decent movie, and then all of a sudden we have a bunch of different competently put together projects in a row? Well, first of all, I think they're a lot more fun than the dreary, super serious movies of the past, which made them more appealing to children and adults alike. But secondly, and I think this is more important, these movies just have a lot more respect for their source material. Even if the finished project wasn't Ibsen, these films feel like love letters to the video games they're based on. The truth is, I think the easiest explanation for this shift in competence is the fact that more and more people who grew up playing video games are simply grown up now, old enough to be making the movies themselves. Rob Letterman, the director of Detective Pikachu, while admittedly a little bit too old to have played the games in his youth, has a great relationship with the franchise because his children are so in love with it. Aaron Horvath, the director of the Super Mario Bros. Movie, grew up watching the Super Mario Bros. Super Show just like I did. He even used that series as an inspiration to have Chris Pratt attempt a Brooklyn accent rather than the Italian one that's famous from the games. We finally did it. I didn't think it was possible, but we did it. Gone are the oldest held executives greenlighting poorly adapted movies because they heard some sort of videographic game was popular with the youth. Here to stay are movie makers with authentic connections to the games they're adapting. We're gonna live forever and we're never going back.
Oh no! We suck again!
Well, I guess not. Just as the seemingly endless onslaught of low-effort adaptations had began to slow, all the movies we just talked about had to go out and make all that money. You and I both know that that is way too big a payday for Hollywood studio execs to pass up on. In back-to-back years, we got the Five Nights at Freddy's movie and the Borderlands movie, scoring 32% and 10% on Rotten Tomatoes respectively. I mean, come on guys. Surely MatPat has milked every ounce of storytelling you can do in the Freddy Fazbear universe. And as for the Borderlands movie, never have I seen a more blatant misunderstanding of just about every character in a cinematic universe. Shocking, honestly. Strangely, Jack Black makes another appearance here as Claptrap, although this one doesn't go as well as the Super Mario Bros. Movie did.
I can't go if you're looking at me! Actually, scrap that. I can. I really can. Actually, it's helping.
Are we really ready for this to finish?
Keep looking at me!
Now, the Borderlands movie flopped, likely because the last mainline series game was released about 5 years before this movie came out. It was also never really, the most popular game in pop culture, even when it was in its prime. But unfortunately, the Five Nights movie rode its frankly unexplainable popularity to a nearly $300 million return at the box office. That, unfortunately, looks like it's going to be good enough for a sequel. And judging by the numbers that the Minecraft movie is doing right now, we might be in for a new dark age, as studio execs are taking a new approach to widening audience appeal. Rather than making their movies grittier in a misguided attempt to bring more adults into the theaters, they're just making these movies dumber, coasting on children and memes to get by. Speaking of which, guys, I really did go into a Minecraft movie with an open mind. In fact, I wanted so badly for the movie to be decent. I've heard a lot of great stories about the cast being really good to their fans. I really do love Minecraft, and so I really wanted to like this movie. But it was just awful, to the point where it pissed me off. Now, as I talk about why it pissed me off so much, I don't want to do a full scene-by-scene recap, just in case you want to go see it this weekend and you don't want all of the surprises ruined for you. But I do want to give you a rundown of the principal cast and a quick overview of the plot before I get into the meat of the review. So for starters, you have 6 main players in this movie. Jack Black as Steve, Jason Momoa as Garrett the Garbage Man Garrison, Sebastian Hansen as Henry, Emma Myers as Natalie, Daniel Brooks as Dawn, and Rachel House as Malgosia. Let's start with Steve first. I just want to say, I knew I was in trouble when this movie opened with Jack Black ripping off that tweet about children yearning for the mines.
As a child, I yearned for the mines.
Bruh. Now, he quotes this tweet while desperately trying to get into a mine shaft as a child, but a grizzled old miner is adamant that children aren't allowed. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me because I feel like historically the miner would be standing on the other side of the door with the child trying to escape the mine. I also feel like it would still be that way, and honestly might be again soon, if it weren't for some very hard fought for child labor laws, but I digress. Anyway, Jack Black goes on to explain how he gets sick of his adult life and ends up back at the mine again.
So we back in the mine.
As an adult. Somehow, the same miner is there blocking the door, who looks a lot like that lead singer from that metal band who's just kind of like staring into the crowd. But he is still refusing to let Jack Black enter for some reason. Don't worry too much about that though, because Jack Black just gives him a head fake and runs past him. He continues to narrate this opening scene as he finds the Tesseract from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He uses the Tesseract to travel to the overworld in the Minecraft dimension. He goes on to continue to translate as he enters the Nether and eventually meets the evil Malgosha, who wants to use the Tesseract to destroy the overworld and all creativity along with it. He then continues to narrate as he gives the Tesseract to his dog Dennis to hide in his home in the real world so that it stays out of Malgosha's hands while he remains imprisoned in the Nether. I'm not joking, this opening narration goes on for 15 plus minutes, maybe. And look, this narration isn't just lazy from a storytelling perspective, it's also just so lazy in its actual writing as well. I mean, I think what Jack Black actually says is, I found a thing, and then I found another thing, and when I put them together, stuff happened.
This thingy and that cool thingy.
And I'm just like, bruh, are you just gonna yada yada the MacGuffin that's gonna drive the entire plot of this movie? Alright, I guess that's the tone we're setting today. We just don't give a fuck. Awesome. Whatever. After a brief pause in narration, we get right back into it as we meet Garrett the Garbage Man Garrison. The commentator of a video game tournament from the 80s tells us that he was a champion of a Street Fighter / Final Fight type of cabinet arcade game way back in the day. And from the visuals on screen, we can tell that he also hasn't moved on much past that point. What you need to know about him, though, is that he runs a vintage video game store that has fallen on hard times, and he's received an eviction notice in the mail. He goes to a storage unit auction to try and make some quick cash. Yes, there's a storage unit auction in this Minecraft movie. While he's there, he ends up purchasing the unit with all of Steve's old stuff in it. Although, I say old, I don't actually know how long Steve has been gone. The movie never really makes it clear. I think they're trying to do a Jumanji thing, where he is like the Nick Jonas character that's been trapped inside the world for longer than the other ones have been. But that's neither here nor there. Jason Momoa buys a storage unit with the stuff in it, including the Tesseract, which he takes back to his store. Now, we're about 20 minutes into the movie by this point, but we still have 3 more of the principal cast to meet, and we're all out of time for narration, so all we're going to get is some lazy expositional dialogue for the rest of them. Henry is your stereotypical nerd boy with a dorky little notebook. Think Max from Shark Boy and Lava Girl.
He ruined my dream journal! I did not tell!
As for Natalie, well guys, I'm going to be honest and say that I think this script was written without any female characters at first. I say that because even though Natalie is Henry's older sister and now sole caretaker after the death of their mother, the movie seems reluctant to give her anything of importance to do. She runs socials for the local potato chip factory and occasionally delivers exposition to the audience or half-hearted encouragement to Henry. But that's about it for her. And on top of that, she's about to disappear for like half the movie here in a minute. This theme continues when they arrive at their new home and meet their realtor, Dawn. The only thing we learn about this character is that she has a lot of side hustles, one of which is running a petting zoo out of her car. So yeah, not a lot to go on there, but don't worry about it because it literally doesn't matter. Now, the last thing I want to do before I get into the plot summary of this movie is ask you guys for help, because all of these characters live in a town called Chugless, Idaho. And I can't for the life of me figure out why that is. I desperately need your help. If you have any idea why this town is called Chugless, please let me know. Because it sounds like a Fortnite thing, but this is the Minecraft movie. So I really don't know what's going on. Please help in the comments below. Anyway, now that you've met the cast, let's talk about how we get from Chugless, Idaho into Minecraft. Henry's off to Chugless High on... Henry's off to Chugless High. Yeah, he's going to Chugless High School. He's on his way to Chugless High for his first day of school when he stops into Garrett's shop on the way. Now Garrett, spotting a troubled young adolescent who seems vulnerable to radicalization, offers to be his life coach for $50 an hour to make some quick cash in order to fix his eviction problems. Sort of like an Andrew Tate of a small town. Henry wisely declines this offer, but he does pick up Garrett's contact info from a flyer he hands him as he's leaving. Once Henry arrives at school though, he's mildly bullied for drawing a banana with a jetpack on it. But he's adamant to prove that it actually works, and the bullies dare him to prove it. Apparently, the teacher is just okay with a child assembling an explosive device on school grounds because he pauses the class and allows him to build a rocket like right there. To my surprise, he actually does build this rocket in like 5 seconds, but the bullies cut a wire right before Henry can ignite this rocket in the schoolyard. Now in my head, I'm thinking, oh man, that really sucks. This is going to be so embarrassing when this rocket doesn't go off. Poor Henry, man. But here's the thing. It does ignite. And it does take off into the sky in what seems to me like a relatively controlled manner. So now I'm thinking, what wire did they cut? Did it just not matter at all? Did it just work for some reason? If this doesn't go wrong, how are we going to get into the plot of the movie? Well, just as I'm having those thoughts in the theater, the jetpack turns suddenly, blasts off in the distance before slamming full force into the potato chip factory and exploding on impact. That, my friends, is crazy. This minor act of terrorism gets Henry called into the principal's office, where Jennifer Coolidge is really phoning it in. She tells him he may be expelled, but for some reason allows him to call his guardian to come pick him up. Thinking fast, Henry calls Garrett and asks him to pick him up instead.
Hi, I'm Henry's uncle.
You? The trash bag?
It's actually garbage, man.
So this child, whose only living relative is his older sister, gets into the car of a man he just met earlier that day without telling anyone he knows, and then drives back to his store with him. It's here that Henry puts the orb of destruction, the Tesseract, into the little glass box, the Earth Crystal, and follows its pull all the way back to the mine that Jack Black originally found. When Henry doesn't come home from school that day, Natalie calls Dawn and asks her for help finding him. They check his location and they arrive at the portal around the same time that the other two do. The portal then begins sucking the Tesseract into it, and Henry refuses to let go, so all four of them end up getting dragged into the wonderful world of Minecraft. When the Tesseract enters the portal, Malgosia is alerted of its presence in the overworld and sends Steve to go and retrieve it for her, pretending that she has Dennis in custody and threatening to kill him if Steve doesn't comply. And honestly, once all the major players are set on a collision course like this, the movie really only has like 3 other things happen. The first night they spend in the game is horrifying. They spend the night getting swarmed by zombies and skeletons. And even though Henry figures out how this world works pretty fast and starts building a huge tower for them to stay the night in, the garbage man still manages to get the Earth Crystal that surrounds the Tesseract destroyed in what felt to me like a blink and you'll miss it moment. But Steve arrives to save the day.
Who are you?
I am Steve.
Okay.
And they ask him how they can get home now that the portal is closed. He tells them they need to go to a woodland mansion to just get a replacement, so they go to a village to stock up on supplies. It's here that they are attacked for the first time by Malgosia's forces, led by one General Chungus. You, sir, have won the internet for the day, because that name is freaking epic. More on him later. In the chaos, the party is split as Steve, Garrett, and Henry end up continuing on to the Woodland Mansion, while Natalie and Dawn are essentially sidelined until the finale. The boys make a large detour to a redstone mine, we'll talk more about that in a second, before breaking into the Woodland Mansion and retrieving the Earth Crystal, only to have Malgosia show up at the last second and steal the Orb of Destruction. It's here that the movie pretends to sacrifice Garrett, as Steve and Henry escape to meet up with Dawn and Natalie, build an army of iron golems and dogs, and basically win the movie after Garrett comes back to save Henry's life. Now that we have a general idea of what's going on and what the stakes are, let's get into what I liked and a lot more of what I disliked about the movie. First, let me start by mentioning the things that I thought went well. Number 1, Jason Momoa is doing everything he can to make this movie watchable. Almost every funny line in this movie comes out of his mouth, and his physical comedy work throughout the whole movie is so good. He does a lot of work with his ass in this movie, let's just say that.
Escape into the over.
He also does a lot of screaming and over-the-top panicking, which at times throughout this film is the only thing keeping this thing on life support. Number 2, I also want to shout out Sebastian Hansen as Henry. I think he does a really good job, and I think that his rapport with Jason Momoa is undeniable. Their chemistry is off the charts. I kept thinking I'd seen him in something else, but I think I was just so taken aback by how much of a pro he seems like in this movie. His work is great. Obviously, wasn't given the best material to work with, but I think he did the best with what he was given. Number 3, I suppose Jack Black did have a couple funny scenes that I should mention here. The first one comes when they're fleeing the village on elytras, and Jack Black has to share one with Jason Momoa to escape. At first, Steve is riding on Garrett's back, but there's a hole in the rocks ahead that they need to get through to escape from the gas that are chasing them. However, it looks like it's going to be too narrow for them to get through like this. So they decide they need to 69 to get through the hole perfectly. And there's a whole lot of talk about leaving zero negative space between them. It's pretty hysterical.
I'm gonna squeeze for your safety. I understand. Wow.
There's also a scene where Garrett is pouring his heart out about how broke he is. And Jack Black just says, "Sorry about your finances." Honestly, funniest line in the movie. It's also the only line that Jack Black delivers in a normal voice. Coincidence? I think not. Number 4, despite the name, I really did like General Chungus. I think Jared Hess did a really good job with the voice acting, and he had me laughing basically the entire time he was on the screen. Unfortunately, the movie decides it's done with him after like 10 minutes, so I don't really know what you want me to do about that. I also really did love the Technoblade tribute. I'm really happy that his family and his fans got to have that. It was really cool to see. But that's about where my goodwill for the movie ends. Now let's get into what made me so mad in the first place. First thing may not seem like a big deal, but it kind of drives you crazy after a while. When I first saw the trailers for this thing, I was hoping upon hope that the blocking and green screen effects that they were showcasing were used sparingly throughout the movie. They were just the most cinematic bits that they could use for marketing. Nope. Turns out that's basically the whole movie after they go through the portal. It feels like every single shot from then on is as many characters as they can have lined up in a row in front of the most ray traced green screen background of Minecraft I've ever seen. The ray tracing also seems to go like around the actors. The sunbeams never seem to catch their faces in a way that my brain thinks it should. There's a bit in this movie where they're in this redstone mine and they've actually built the set for it, and it looks immensely better than the rest of the movie. It's ridiculous. Now, I understand you can't build a full Minecraft set for every setting in this movie because that would be absurd, but I wish that they had figured out a way to make it seem like the actors had more than 80 square feet to move around in, or to keep it from feeling like I'm looking up at someone who's standing between me and the sun. This movie also does a whole lot of what I find to be the cringiest thing in any video game movie adaptation. That is explaining the rules of the game. I think we've all seen the Flint and Steel clip from the trailer.
Flint and Steel.
Or all the videos of people losing their minds in theaters when Jack Black introduces the chicken jockey. And those are definitely among the most egregious examples, but this movie is shot through with stuff like that, basically every other scene. For some reason, writers for movies like this feel like they need to explain every little thing that's happening in the game universe, as if they're afraid casual viewers will lose interest the second they have to infer something from context. Movies based on books don't dumb things down to this level, and certainly original films don't count on the viewers having to have every little thing explained to them. Like I said earlier, Detective Pikachu didn't resort to this. It had a brief moment in the beginning that explained the gist of catching a Pokemon, but after that, it just went on and told its story. And that's a Pokemon movie. A franchise whose flagship anime has to stop in the middle of every episode so that the Pokedex can spoon feed information to the audience.
Who's that Pokemon?
It's Pikachu!
It's Clefairy!
If those guys managed to create a living, breathing, easy to understand fictional universe for their movie, I don't see why Minecraft, a very simple game at its core about collecting resources and crafting things out of them, couldn't do the same. The perfect example of this is a scene that I think many of you have seen, I think it was in one of the trailers, where there's two pandas eating bamboo, and all of a sudden a third one pops up out of nowhere. What a nice little nod to how animal breeding and reproduction happens in the game. Nobody mentions it, nobody explicitly explains what's happening, it's just there, and everybody who gets it, gets it. But then Jack Black and company come screaming out of the sky, yelling about how they're going to use a water bucket to break their fall, literally blowing up the whole scene and sending pandas everywhere.
Don't worry! I'm gonna cushion our fall with this water bucket! Release!
Now, to give the movie props here, they do go a little off book, having Henry do something a little fun by making something out of real world objects like his tater tot launcher. However, they do precede that scene by having Jack Black explain in a song the concept of an automatic chicken farm, so I can really only give partial credit. This movie doesn't just over-explain the rules of the game itself though. It tries to over-explain just about everything. Even if we set aside the opening, 20 minutes of narration, the writing is still just incredibly lazy at times. And even worse, it doesn't even have the balls to be okay with that fact. Constantly, this movie will try and explain away a didn't bother to fix, but that I promise you almost no one would have cared about if they had just blown past it. The first example happens when we meet Natalie and Henry for the first time. While they're in the process of moving to Chugless, Natalie mentions that they have to go there because that was their mom's dying wish. Or at least that's how she interpreted it. Now you, as the audience member, are left really confused because what does she mean? What does that mean? First of all, you would be totally okay if they just lived in this town already. I mean, every other character in this movie already lives in Chugless. And if you really just wanted the first day of school thing for Henry, you could have just had him make the jump from middle school to high school. But no, instead of any of that, they try to justify this girl and her younger brother moving to this backwater town because their dying mom said so. Sorta, kinda. And don't even get me started on why the mom would say something like that, because we don't really ever learn anything about her. It's not like this is her old hometown or something, and when the kids get there, no one knows who they are. So why would she send them here with her dying wish? I don't know, man, but I wouldn't be asking so many questions if you had just blown through and had them move in for no real reason at all, or just have lived there in the first place. This happens over and over throughout the course of the movie, and it is so frustrating because it's so unnecessary. When the Nether Army is preparing for its attack on the village, they mention offhand that they know the crew is there thanks to their spies in the area. But it's a point of emphasis that the piglins can't survive in the overworld without turning into zombies unless they use a potion that is introduced after the fact. Malgosha receives a signal from the Tesseract the second it re-enters the Minecraft world. Why can't we just assume that they're tracking them that way? Speaking of the potion, and this one makes me mad, Malgosha gives General Chungus a bottle of it so that his army can go to the surface and attack the village. But General Chungus remarks that there may not be enough to go around. Malgosha doesn't care. She just tells him to make do with what he has. And so he just turns around and tells his crew to take tiny sips. I shit you not, I was rolling around in my reclining chair with rage, trying to figure out what purpose this serves in the movie. Why would you put this in? Like, dude, at the point that she hands him the bottle, as far as I'm concerned, there's plenty more where that came from, and the whole army's gonna be fine. But then you animated the bottle, you animated the entire piglin army, and you, for some reason, thought to yourself, oh no, we drew too many of them. No one's gonna believe that this much potion is enough for all these soldiers. I better write something to clear that up. Even still, you had the chance to just have Malgosha say, hey, just go grab some more from the armory then. Why are you bothering me? I don't know, something, anything. But instead you go with, everybody let's just take tiny sips. Why? Adding to my confusion and frustration throughout the film was this feeling that so many things were happening at once, but nothing of importance ever really happened. The script is getting a little bit long, so I'll only give one example, but this one absolutely makes my blood boil. So later on in the film, Steve and Henry crash land nearby where Natalie and Dawn have built a mushroom house for some reason. But they're both knocked out in this crash. Jack Black comes to inside this mushroom house, looks over, and sees Henry flat on his back, unconscious. Natalie tells him that Henry's just resting, and so he and Dawn run out to go look at the house that they built. They stand outside for maybe a second while Jack Black remarks about how much Garrett would have loved this house. It's not clear why he says this. Garrett has never really expressed any interest in anything that's happened in the world of Minecraft. Certainly not building and certainly not mushrooms, so I'm not really sure what they're getting at here. But there's no time to dwell on any of that because we cut immediately back to Henry sitting fully upright, fully awake, having a conversation with Natalie on the bed. Already this is jarring because this child was comatose not 5 seconds ago. But then the camera switches angles to reveal that Dawn and Steve are just like standing there across the room. Keep in mind, this is maybe 3 or 4 seconds after the movie made a very concerted effort to show them exiting the scene and going to look at the outside of the house. It feels like they chopped out bits of this part, but if that's the case, why keep any of it? Because none of it matters. A lot of these scenes in this movie will give you whiplash like this, because a lot of them feel like they're either missing context entirely, or that they've just been inserted randomly around the right timestamp in the film. The most frustrating thing of all, though, was this movie's complete lack of understanding of film tropes and structure. I have 3 main gripes here, one of which deals with the main message of the movie itself. The first issue I have is that this movie has a complete lack of stakes. Early on, Jason Momoa punches a creeper and then stands about 2 inches from it while it proceeds to explode and send him flying back across the field 50 yards. Nothing happens, he just gets up, and it's a quick laugh. Fine. I get that it's a joke, but the cost of making it is that I no longer believe that anything bad will happen to anyone in this movie. When Garrett blows himself up at the Woodland Mansion, there is zero part of you that believes that he is dead. I think during that scene I turned to look at Ellie, my wife, and told her, if they want us to think that he's dead, they must have an unbelievably low expectation of us. The second issue I have with this movie is where I can see it trying to imitate other films and the tropes that they have without putting in the work to do so. This movie attempts to have a third act conflict between Henry and Garrett because it has seen other movies have their protagonists fight right before the climax, only to reunite and save the day. It's just that the way a Minecraft movie tries to set this conflict up is borderline insulting. See, the conflict stems from Garrett's finances, or lack thereof, when he learns that Steve has hidden a bunch of diamonds in a redstone mine somewhere. He orders Steve to take him there, holding the Tesseract for ransom. Now, in a good movie, you might actually get to witness the consequences of Garrett's secret, selfish task to go and get these diamonds. Maybe somebody gets gravely wounded along the way to this alternate route, or the enemy gains the upper hand using the time they took to take that detour. Not here, though. Here, when Garrett asks about the diamonds, Steve tells him that it would be a major detour and that the mines can be perilous. In other words, Jack Black may as well turn and look down the barrel of the camera and say, hey kids, going to get these diamonds would be bad. It would also be dangerous. Garrett is selfish for asking this. We get no sense of how far out of the way these mines are because one, a Lytra flight here, 6090 included, and they're basically knocking on the door. Sure, the piglins catch up to them while they're there at the mines, but it's not like they weren't going to follow them wherever they go anyway. And also, they show up again at the Woodland Mansion no matter what, so it doesn't really seem like that was a problem. Still, the movie is dedicated to having this conflict, so Henry rounds on Garrett the second he gets a whiff that it was his idea to come to the mines, because something his sister could be in danger. None of this feels earned. Natalie and Dawn are never really in any danger, nor do they even get close to the Woodland Mansion at all. And the decision to separate from them was made independent of Garrett's finance-driven decision. Henry doesn't even really stay mad about it all that long or consistently either. He snaps in and out of being angry at Garrett for like the next 2 to 3 movie minutes before just completely forgetting about it. Bonus gripe here for the movie's attempt at an A-B story structure, given that the plot really only advances when Steve, Garrett, and Henry are on screen. After the village scene, Dawn and Natalie are just kind of wandering around for a good while. They start off trying to find a map to the Woodland Mansion before they just kind of like give up on it. They just kind of stop and walk around until they run into Dennis, and then I suppose just wait for Steve and Henry to crash land so that they can nurse them back to health. The movie also just keeps cutting back to Jennifer Coolidge trying to fuck this villager that she hit with her car whenever it snuck through a portal to the real world. I honestly thought they would drop this storyline after they split the party now that they had an actual B story to cut to, but no, they just continued to cut back and forth between 2 separate plots that went nowhere rather than just the one. Anyways, my third and maybe biggest issue with this movie is that I'm not really sure what it's trying to say. Or even if I am, I don't think it does it very well. I think the point the movie's trying to make is that even though people may bully you for being different, creativity is a skill that's vital to survival, and eventually you will find a place where those skills are appreciated. I agree with that message, and the sentiment behind one of the final lines of the movie is something that I resonate with a lot. I'm paraphrasing here, but someone asks Henry what he's going to do if people continue to bully him for his creativity, to which he responds that he'll just keep creating anyway. So it's not the message I disagree with, it's that I don't think the movie did a good enough job setting up that point from the beginning. For starters, Henry doesn't really showcase the type of creativity I normally see in these fish out of water stories. Most of these people are like creative writers or comic book artists, stuff like that. And I'm not saying I want them to follow a particular style of character. They can innovate if they want. I just think it's a little weird that whenever people start picking on Henry for drawing a banana with a jetpack on it, he starts explaining his creation with math. I'm not saying engineering doesn't require creativity, nor am I saying that people who really like math don't get bullied a lot in high school. But I will say that the nicest building on my university's campus was dedicated to engineering. Whereas if you studied writing or art, you would be killed in the street if anyone found out. Second, the movie attempts to plant its flag in this theme for the first time in the village scene, where Steve is encouraging Natalie to allow Henry to explore his creative side, as that kind of stuff is vital to survival in the world of Minecraft. Natalie retorts with the obvious, asking Steve if he's aware that Henry blew up a factory back home with his creativity. Henry overhears this, of course, and storms off, arguing that maybe he is better off in the Minecraft world if everyone's gonna keep being so annoying about his literal chugless missile crisis. And I've seen movies do this before, right? We all have. Where a parent or guardian is just concerned about how their child is going to be perceived by the world, but the child misinterprets this as disapproval of a core tenet of their being. And that's great, right? That's a good way to drive tension. But in this case, I think Natalie is right to be concerned. If she continues to let him explore his creative side in the ways he has in the past, we might have the next Unabomber on our hands. So it undercuts the message slightly when the thing that Henry gets upset about is the fact that his sister says it was bad to bomb a potato chip factory. But finally, at the end of the movie, Henry and Steve must both decide if they're going to stay in the Minecraft world or if they're going to return to the real world where their creativity may not be appreciated. Once again, this might be meaningful if Natalie, the one who was supposed to represent a child forced to grow up too quickly and abandon all creativity in service of joining the real world, wasn't gonna go back and return to her job as a social media brand manager. This whole time, she's supposed to be the one who got real and represents what the real world does to people, but she still works in the creative industry, so I feel like maybe the movie gave her this job because they wanted her to seem cool. Maybe they thought that was the only job that kids these days would know about. Or I don't know, maybe they decided it'd be too sad for her to have to get a job on the production line shortly after the death of her mother. I don't know. There's also no real reason to leave her stay in the first place. It seems like you can come as go as you please now that Malgosia is dead, so the whole thing is entirely pointless. The ending really does feel like they're just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks, but I guess they all get a happy ending, so hooray. Anyways, the movie was bad, but at least some of the performers put up some pretty fun performances. 2 out of 10. I've tried to avoid other reviews while I was writing the script for this video because I wanted to form my own opinions about the movie, but I've been lurking on Instagram to try and keep a pulse on the internet's general reaction to this movie. I've noticed 2 things that I think spell trouble for video game adaptations, and just movies in general, honestly. The first is people flocking to cinemas to see this movie for the bit, and recording their theater's reaction to some of the worst parts of the movie, and then uploading that to social media. It's clear that a lot of people knew this movie would be terrible, and saw it anyway, myself included, because this movie made over $300 million worldwide opening weekend, and it rode memes and brand recognition all the way there. It just makes me wonder, will there be a day when all movies are like this? Where we all gather to make fun of how terrible they are, and then all rush home to watch our favorite commentary YouTubers? Rip them to pieces? The second trend I've noticed makes me fear that this will be our reality sooner rather than later. A surprising number of people are just okay with this movie being terrible because it's supposed to be funny and it's just a movie for kids. I'm sorry, but I disagree. I know as a country we have a strong anti-intellectualism streak, and I know that we've been straying away from critical thinking for a while now. But I don't think we should ever get to a point where we just give things permission to be bad because they're supposed to be comedic or because they're made for children. It's possible to write a comedy that has some heart behind it and has something to say. It's also possible, and arguably infinitely more important than anything else going on right now, that children's programming be made in the highest quality. I just can't believe that people are okay with a movie just phoning it in, so long as the only intended audience is those that are still impressionable and vulnerable. I also think it's so rich for this movie to shame Garrett about derailing the adventure in search of diamonds, when that's exactly what the studio behind this movie did for box office returns. Sorry about your finances, but I know this could have been done better. Anyways, I've been Aaron Trevino. If you're still here after all that rambling, you're a real one, and I think you'd really enjoy the community that we're building here. Feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below to let me know what you thought about this movie. I'll see you guys next time.